I'd driven about 5 hours that day to a family gathering, one of those reunions where you barely recognize anyone, and everyone wants to remind you how much weight you've gained or lost. I had my 5-year-old son with me, but my husband couldn't come because of work. It was fine though. It felt good to see everyone after 20 years, even if most of them were just polite strangers at this point. The weirdest part of the night was when my aunt, she's this old hippie type, always drunk or stoned or both, came up to me and said, "I see an owl on your shoulder protecting you." I laughed it off and told her I'd see her again in another 20 years, hopefully when she'd laid off the bong. But it stuck with me for some reason. When the event was over, I started the long drive home. It was around 2 a.m., middle of nowhere, barely any streetlights, and my son had fallen asleep in the back seat. You know that feeling when your eyes start to close on their own, like little danger naps sneaking up on you? That's what was happening. I decided to pull into a rest stop before I did something stupid. It wasn't a nice highway rest area either, just a small dirt lot with a couple of old picnic tables and a flickering light by the bathroom building, completely silent except for the sound of the wind moving through the trees. I figured I'd get out, stretch my legs, have a quick smoke, and wake up a bit before driving again. I stepped out and closed the door quietly so I wouldn't wake my son. When I turned around, there it was, a big white barn owl, standing about a meter from the car, staring straight at me. It didn't move or blink, just stood there, like it had been waiting for me to get out. Its feathers looked almost silver in the dim light, and for a second I thought maybe it was injured or something. But no, it just kept staring. I lit my cigarette and tried not to think too much of it. Maybe it was used to cars stopping around here. I lit my cigarette and tried not to think too much of it. Maybe it was used to cars stopping around here. Maybe it hunted mice in the lot. I remember thinking about what my aunt said earlier, about an owl protecting me, and I actually laughed a bit at the coincidence. When I finished the smoke, I got back into the car and locked the doors. My kid was still sleeping peacefully, and I thought maybe I'd rest my eyes for 20 or 30 minutes. Better safe than sorry, right? I tilted the seat back, closed my eyes, and tried to relax. When I woke up, it was because of this loud banging noise. It sounded like metal getting hit hard, followed by a scratching sound that made my stomach drop. I sat up and looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Then I saw it. The owl was on the hood of my car. It was flapping its wings, slamming itself against the metal, and clawing at the windshield like it was trying to get inside. It looked furious, its wings spreading wide enough to cover half the glass. The sound was horrible. Sharp, heavy thuds and the screeching of talons dragging against the paint. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there frozen, staring at this bird that seemed completely out of its mind. I thought maybe the headlights had scared it, or maybe it saw its reflection and was attacking it. But then I noticed something else. Out of the corner of my eye, through the driver's side window, there was a shadow. I turned, and there was a man standing right outside my door. He was just there, looking in at me. I didn't even hear him walk up. He was holding a cigarette, staring straight through the glass, like he'd been there for a while. My whole body went cold. I don't remember thinking clearly. My hands just moved on their own. I hit the lock button, made sure every door was shut tight, and turned the key. The car roared to life and the owl flew off, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, cigarette in his hand, watching me. Then he started walking toward the front of the car. I shifted into reverse, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped the gear. He suddenly lunged at the door handle, yanking it hard and pounding on the window with his fist. I could see his face now. No emotion, just this blank stare. I slammed the accelerator, tires spinning on the dirt, and shot backward out of the parking spot. He kept chasing after the car for a few steps before disappearing into the darkness behind me. I didn't stop. I drove until I hit the main road, probably going way over the limit. My heart was racing so hard, I thought I might pass out. I didn't even look in the mirrors. I just kept going. After a few minutes, I started shaking so badly I had to pull over again, this time at a gas station that actually had lights and cameras. I sat there for a while and finally called the police. They sent someone out, but when they went to check the rest stop, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no car, nothing. The officer tried to be nice about it, but I could tell he thought I was either dreaming or exaggerating. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just overtired and freaked myself out. But I know what I saw. That man was real. And that owl. I don't know. I still think about it sometimes. Because if I hadn't pulled over, if I hadn't woken up when I did, or if the owl hadn't started going crazy on the hood, he could have opened the door before I ever noticed him standing there. People always joke about guardian angels showing up in strange forms, but now every time I see an owl, I get this chill down my spine. It's like a reminder. Something was waiting for me out there in the dark that night, and something else made sure I drove away before it reached me. One night, my wife and I hit the end of our rope with bedtime. Our 3-year-old wouldn't settle. Our 1-year-old took his cues from his brother and ramped up any time the house got quiet. We ran through every trick that used to work. Singing, a warm bottle, the fan on low, white noise on my phone. Nothing helped, and somehow each thing made the other kid angry. We were already sharp with each other, because there is a point where the fatigue makes every suggestion sound like a criticism. I said we should do a drive since motion used to knock our older one out, and my wife said yes fast because at least the car would give us a small space that felt different from the rooms where nothing worked. We packed in a hurry, diaper bag with wipes, one extra onesie, a sippy cup that always leaks a little, but not so much you remember to replace it. My wife buckled them while I grabbed keys and 2 light blankets. It was warm, but the AC sometimes takes a minute, and sleepy kids like the wait. We didn't even talk about where to go. The route was automatic. Take the quiet county highway to the interstate. Go 10 or 12 miles west. Turn around and come back. The loop has just enough straight road and just enough hum in the tires to smooth their breathing. That county road always feels darker than it should. It runs through the suburbs of New York City, yet there are long gaps with no streetlights at all. You pass a strip of offices that close by 6, then a stretch of wetlands with nothing but low fencing and a sound that could be wind or water, depending on the night. We merged from the local road and I brought it up to about 50. The middle lane was clear. The right shoulder sometimes hides a dead deer, and I would rather have space on either side if something jumps. We had barely settled in when I saw a shape in the headlights. My brain searched for the answer that fits most nights out there, which is a deer or a bag that caught air, and it did not land on either. I said there's something in the road, and by the time my wife sat forward, we were already past it. It was a person. He had crossed the fast lane and stepped into a line that would have met our bumper if we had been 10 feet slower. If there had been other cars, I think my body would have processed it as part of the usual highway chaos. A bad decision that will end in yelling or sirens. That stretch was empty, no taillights ahead, no headlights behind. It looked like the entire road belonged to us and to the one person who chose that exact second to step across it. The emptiness is what made my stomach drop, because he could have crossed 10 seconds earlier with no risk. Or 10 seconds later. He picked us. I kept the wheel steady and my eyes on the mirror because that is what you do when surprise lands in the lane next to you. I thought I saw something long in his hand when we passed, like a stick or a bat. My wife didn't see it, which was fair. She didn't see him until we were already by. I told my wife I was going to phone 911. She nodded and looked back at the boys. I gave the operator the location as best I could. County Highway eastbound, just past the business park, before the long wetland run. I said a person had stepped into the road. She sounded bored at first and told me people cross there at night all the time. No one had been hit, so it did not sound like something they send a car for. I said I thought he had a stick or a bat, and her tone changed. She asked me to repeat the mile marker and said she would dispatch. We didn't realize our 3-year-old had caught the word person. We told him it was a deer because that's easier for a kid to picture. He said, "But I heard you say a person," and my wife quickly told him it was probably just a deer, that we wanted to make sure the police moved it so no one got hurt. He looked at me like he could see straight through the story. Then his expression softened. The car was dark, the road was steady beneath us, and the hum of the tires finally pulled him back toward sleep. Both kids were asleep by the time we reached the spot where I'd planned to turn around. For a second, I thought about just keeping on west. The car was quiet. The air felt calm for the first time all night, and it was like we were sitting in a little pocket of peace I didn't want to give up, but we stuck to the plan, took the exit, and looped onto the eastbound service road. After about a quarter mile, everything came to a stop. Traffic backed up from a wreck ahead. We could have just waited it out and taken the side streets home, but I told my wife I wanted to get back on the interstate instead. I said maybe if we passed that same stretch again and saw nothing, it would settle that feeling sitting in my chest. She agreed, and I think we both just needed to see for ourselves that the call hadn't turned into something worse. The eastbound stretch was empty at first. Then we hit the bend, and I saw the red and blue lights bleeding through the trees. The glow flickered over the trunks in that way that tells you what's waiting ahead before you actually see it. I slowed down without even thinking. My chest just tightened on its own. We were the first car they stopped. One cruiser was parked across the middle and slow lanes. Another angled near the fast lane. About 15 yards ahead, a shape lay under a blanket in the fast lane. The way the fabric curved and dipped told more than I wanted to know. A single shoe sat in the middle lane near the blanket, the other one farther down near the shoulder. Between them, bits of broken plastic caught the lights like dull little stars scattered across the asphalt. 2 cars were pulled over on the shoulder with their hazards flashing. The drivers stood by the guardrail with their hands on their heads. No shouting, no movement, just that still, hollow posture people have when the adrenaline's drained out and there's nothing left to do. An officer started walking toward us, and I heard movement from the back seat. Our 3-year-old sat up at exactly the wrong moment. He asked, "What's that?" And before I could even form an answer, an ambulance pulled in and stopped right between our hood and the blanket. It blocked his view completely. I remember silently thanking whatever small mercy handles details like that when the big things go wrong. The officer leaned down to my window, and I told him we were the ones who'd called earlier, 15 minutes before, about someone in the road. He nodded, said to stay put, and went to get our information. Cars started stacking up behind us. After a while, some drivers decided to do that thing people do when they've had enough of waiting. They turned the on-ramp into an off-ramp just to get away. We stayed, partly because the officer told us to, and partly because leaving would have felt like a different kind of wrong. It was 3 hours before they finally let us turn around on the closed highway and drive back the way we'd come. The first 15 minutes of that drive were me trying to convince my son that ambulances sometimes help hurt deer, and that's what this one was doing. He didn't believe me. He asked why there were shoes in the road if it was a deer. He fell asleep before I had to make up another answer. When we got home, the house felt different, quieter, but with a sort of hollow echo to it. We carried the kids to bed and sat in the living room without turning on a light. We talked quietly. We circled the same details over and over, saying them out loud so they'd stop shifting around in our heads. The next day, we told our parents and a few close friends what happened. It felt like the only way to deal with it without pretending it was small. We hugged a lot. We tried to go to bed early, but didn't sleep much. About a week later, a detective called. He wanted to go over our statement again. We told him everything, what we saw, where we were, what time it was. He asked if I was sure about the object I'd thought I saw in the person's hand. I told him I couldn't swear to it. He said that was okay. Then he told us the family wanted to thank us for calling when we did, for staying when the officers flagged us down, for helping them piece together their father's last moments. Then he said something that stuck with me. It didn't make complete sense to them, but they were grateful anyway. I didn't ask what didn't make sense. I already had enough that didn't. After that, we stayed off that road for a while. The kids still fought bedtime, but we switched to long walks, quiet cartoons, and pacing the living room until our arms ached. When we had to drive at night, we stuck to surface streets. Still, I kept thinking about that bend, the one where the trees flashed red and blue, the two shoes sitting far apart, the broken plastic scattered between them like someone had drawn a line through the night and dared you to follow it. I grew up in a small southern town, the kind where everyone knows everyone and not much ever changes. On the edge of town, there's this long 4-lane highway that nobody really uses. It looks brand new, even though it's been there for years, because no one drives on it. My dad told me they built it mostly for football season at the state university a couple hours away. Some alumni apparently wanted a direct route, so they could tailgate, drink all the way there, and avoid the main interstate. So most of the year, that highway just sits there, empty, surrounded by pine trees and farmland, stretching for miles with barely a light in sight. One night a few years ago, my girlfriend and I were driving that road heading back from a friend's place. It was one of those humid southern nights where the air feels thick and heavy, and the only light comes from your headlights. It must have been close to midnight, because I remember how quiet it was. Even the radio felt too loud, so we turned it down and just let the hum of the tires fill the silence. You can go miles on that road without seeing another pair of headlights. It's eerie in a way, like the world just ends beyond the reach of your high beams. We were in the middle of nowhere when I saw something. No, someone, standing dead center in the road. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me because the guy wasn't moving at all. I slammed the brakes and swerved just enough to miss him. The car lurched to the side and my girlfriend screamed. When we stopped, the guy was standing there in the rearview mirror, motionless, facing straight ahead. He didn't even flinch when we almost hit him. I thought, what the hell is this guy doing? I pulled up a few feet and turned on the hazards. There were no other cars, no houses, no lights. Just this guy, pale as a sheet, barefoot, wearing black clothes that looked too clean for someone walking on the side of the road. He wasn't even looking at us, just staring into the distance like he was watching something way beyond us. My first thought was that he was high or had wandered out of the woods. We get our share of meth heads around there, and people can look rough, but he didn't. He looked normal, maybe early 20s, clean-shaven, and short hair. But something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. I rolled down the window a little and called out to him. That's when he moved. He kind of snapped his head toward us all at once, like someone had pressed play after pausing him. He walked up to the car slowly, and I swear his steps didn't match his movement, like he was gliding more than walking. I could see his face better now in the headlights. His eyes were wide, glassy, unfocused. He looked at me, but not really at me, like he was staring through me. He said he'd been in an accident. His voice was calm but shaky. He said his car had rolled off the road, that it was dark and he couldn't find it. I looked past him into the woods, but didn't see any sign of a wreck. No lights, no smoke, nothing. Just rows of pines on both sides, tight enough that a car couldn't have gone far without hitting a tree. I asked where his car was, and he kind of hesitated. He glanced toward the trees, but didn't answer. My girlfriend whispered that we should just call someone, but the guy didn't seem threatening, just confused. He kept rubbing his arms like he was cold, even though it was a warm night. I told him we could take him to a gas station a few miles up the road so he could call for help. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Will you please invite me into your vehicle? Not can you give me a ride, not can I get in." He said, "Invite me." And he said it more than once. "Please invite me into your vehicle." Same tone, same words, over and over. At first, I thought maybe he was just in shock or something, repeating himself out of confusion. But the way he said it, it wasn't pleading, it was almost formal. Like there were rules to this situation I didn't understand. I started noticing other details then. His feet were bare, but they weren't dirty. His clothes weren't torn or dusty. If he'd really rolled a car or crawled out of the woods, there should have been something. Blood, scratches, a limp, anything. But he looked untouched. Perfectly fine, except for that distant, empty look. My girlfriend reached over and grabbed my arm. She whispered, "Don't let him in." She said it so quietly, I almost didn't hear her. I told the guy we didn't have phones and that we'd drive to the store down the road to get help. He just stood there and nodded slowly, still staring. I started driving and kept watching him in the rearview mirror. He didn't move. He just stood in the middle of the lane, watching the taillights fade, same way he was standing when we first saw him. We drove about 5 miles before we saw the gas station, and the whole time I kept checking the mirror, even though I knew he was long out of sight. My girlfriend finally broke the silence. She kind of laughed under her breath and said, "I think he might have been a vampire." Then a moment later, her tone shifted, and she said, "What if he wasn't lying? What if he was in an accident and he's hurt somewhere out there?" For a moment, I almost turned around, but something deep in my gut told me not to. We called the sheriff's office from the station phone. They said they'd send someone out. We waited there for maybe half an hour, but no patrol car ever came. Finally, I told the clerk what happened, and he looked at me like he'd heard it before. He said people had reported strange things on that stretch of road for years. We drove home eventually, trying to convince ourselves it was just some weird coincidence. But the next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I drove back out there during daylight, retraced our route, and looked for any sign of a wreck. There was nothing. Not a broken branch, not a tire mark, not even a piece of glass. The asphalt looked untouched. Later that week, I checked the local paper, an online police blotter. No accident reports, no missing persons, nothing. I don't know who that guy was or what we saw that night. Maybe he was real, maybe not, but I can still see his face when I think about it. How calm he looked, how he kept repeating those same words. "Please invite me into your vehicle." Sometimes when I drive that way at night, I still catch myself glancing at the shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, barefoot, waiting. If you're out there, vampire man, wear shoes next time. You'd be a lot more believable.